By the end of that summer, my world looked nothing like I'd planned, and by the time it was over, my own family had dragged me into court and tried to ruin everything I'd built. I never thought I'd see my name in legal filings under defendant, especially not because of the people who raised me. But if you've ever given everything to family, your money, your time, your heart, and still been told you were selfish, then you know how fast loyalty can turn into ammunition. I'm Samantha Parker. I'm 31. I'm the vice president of marketing at one of the fastest growing tech agencies in Brooklyn. My life, from the outside, looks like a glossy LinkedIn success story. Penthouse view, six-figure income, designer coffee every morning. But none of that tells you how many years I spent propping up a family who saw me as the reliable one, the built-in safety net, the responsible daughter who'd always figure it out. I thought I understood betrayal. I thought it looked like harsh words or slammed doors. But what happened to me was colder, calculated, and public. What they didn't know was I'd been keeping receipts, and not just the digital kind. I'd learned early that in my family, evidence was the only way to survive. So before I tell you how it all fell apart, let me ask, have you ever had to choose between your own peace and your family's approval? If that's you, let me know where you're watching from. I didn't grow up expecting this. I grew up believing sacrifice was just what you did. My parents raised two daughters, and the classic American success tradition, my younger sister Chloe was the golden child, the creative soul, always one step away from making it as an artist. If only she had a little more support. I was the backup generator. When a problem came up, I solved it. When something broke, I paid for it. If you asked my parents, they'd say they raised two strong, independent women. But if you watched our lives unfold, you'd see the difference. Chloe's problems were family emergencies. Mine were character-building exercises. The truth is, the signs were always there. I just didn't want to believe them. I spent my 20s picking up the slack tuition checks, rent deposits, emergency wire transfers for Chloe's latest failed business venture. I covered the costs of holidays, bought my mom a new car when hers died, even co-signed a loan when my dad's credit wasn't enough. Every time, I told myself it was temporary. That's what family does. Right. But looking back now, I see how those moments stacked up. There was the time Chloe forgot to pay her studio rent, and Mom called me in tears, insisting, "It's just until she gets her next commission." Sam, you know how tough the art world is. Or when Dad accidentally used my credit card for a month's worth of groceries, he Venmo'd me half. Eventually, I kept letting it go, telling myself I could handle it, that I was strong enough. That was my first mistake. What nobody saw was the toll it took. The hours of extra consulting work, the jobs I took on the side, the student debt I carried, because every spare dollar went to someone else's need. The resentment I swallowed when my accomplishments were met with polite applause, while Chloe's latest unfinished mural was cause for a family dinner and a post on Mom's Facebook. My family's public face was always unity, support, sophistication. Behind closed doors, I was a walking, breathing contingency plan. I wish I could say I saw it coming the way it would all unravel. But the last straw was a surprise. It wasn't a screaming match or a final angry phone call. It was quiet, precise. I came home from a 10-day work trip, exhausted and jet-lagged, and found my life had been rewritten without me. But I'll get to that. First, let me show you just how deep the pattern of sacrifice really went. If you'd asked anyone in my family, they'd tell you I was the strong one, reliable, the fixer, the problem solver who could always be counted on, even when nobody actually asked what it cost me. That role didn't start in adulthood. It was woven in from the very beginning. In my family, love was measured in crisis management, and there was always a crisis, usually with Chloe at the center. Looking back, the pattern was almost comical in its predictability. Chloe lost her backpack. I'd be the one scouring the park, retracing her steps until midnight. She needed help with homework. I'd rewrite her essays, making them sound just enough like her so Mom wouldn't notice. When my dad forgot to pick us up after soccer, I'd be the one calming Chloe down in the school office, inventing stories about why he was late. Responsibility wasn't something I took on. It was something handed to me, quietly and relentlessly, as if by default. As we grew up, the stakes only got higher. I landed a full-ride scholarship to college, but my parents barely celebrated. Chloe, on the other hand, switched majors 3 times and still got a tearful congratulatory post from Mom every semester. I worked 2 jobs through college nannying, tutoring, waiting tables while Chloe spent weekends in immersive creative retreats and study abroad programs, always with a little extra money from home. My parents called it supporting her potential. What they really meant was, Samantha will figure it out. When I graduated, I moved to New York on my own, determined to build something for myself. My parents were proud, at least. That's what they said in Christmas cards. Meanwhile, Chloe moved back home, floated from project to project, always promising that the next big break was just around the corner. When she needed a security deposit for her first apartment, I wrote the check. When her car broke down, I paid for the repairs. I told myself this was what families did. I didn't realize I was underwriting her life while patching the holes in my own. It wasn't just about money. It was emotional, too. Every birthday, every holiday, every graduation, Chloe was the center of gravity. The golden child, the one with the special spark. I learned early to keep my own wins quiet, to shrink myself so she could shine. When I landed a promotion at 27, my first 6-figure salary, my mom's first question was, "Can you help Chloe with her rent this month? She's having a rough patch." I was proud for about 3 seconds. Even as I advanced in my career, the pattern never changed. I became the family's unofficial bank, therapist, emergency contact, and PR manager. I handled Mom's medical bills when insurance got complicated, walked Dad through his early retirement paperwork, and reviewed Chloe's endless business proposals, all of which somehow ended with me fronting the cash. Whenever I tried to set boundaries, the guilt trips came fast. Family comes first. Sam, she just needs a little more time. You know you're the only one we can count on. And I bought into it. I thought that if I just kept saying yes, if I kept showing up, eventually they'd see me. Not as the fallback, not as the insurance policy, but as a daughter. Maybe even as a person worth choosing for once. But the more I gave, the less they noticed. Every sacrifice became the new baseline. Every act of generosity quietly erased the minute a new problem appeared. Chloe never said thank you. My parents never remembered the details, just the outcome. When they did offer praise, it was always with that loaded, backhanded tone. "You're so strong." "Sam, I don't know what we'd do without you." But nobody ever asked if I wanted that job. There were warning signs. Of course, little moments that, looking back, make my stomach turn. The Christmas my parents spent thousands on a new art studio for Chloe, while my own gifts were gift cards and a scented candle. The time Dad called me the stable one right after asking me to help cover their property taxes. Or the year Chloe crashed my car and my parents expected me to apologize for making her feel bad. I kept telling myself it would get better, that if I just helped a little more, sacrificed a little longer, things would even out. But deep down, I was starting to realize something. In my family, my value was tied directly to how much I could give. And that realization was steadily poisoning every conversation, every phone call, every visit home. Still, I kept going. I convinced myself it was just a rough patch, that Chloe would finally stand on her own, that my parents would finally see me for who I was. It never happened. The cycle just kept repeating, year after year, until the day it all snapped. And that breaking point, the moment the entire pattern crashed down, came quietly. It started, like so many betrayals, with something small that grew into something I couldn't ignore. The strange thing about betrayal is how quiet it can be. You always imagine some kind of explosion, a fight, an obvious moment where everything shatters. But sometimes, it slips in sideways, disguised as ordinary life, until you're already standing in the rubble, wondering how you missed the warning signs. It started with little things. The first was a text from my mom, just after I landed at JFK, still groggy from a red eye and scrolling through unread emails. "Don't rush back tonight," she wrote. "We're redoing the floors. Chloe has an installation, so the place is chaos." That wasn't unusual. Chloe's art projects always took over the family apartment. But this time, she'd sent it to our family group chat me, my parents, and Chloe. I noticed, for the first time, that Chloe had changed her profile photo to a shot of her in a bright new studio, surrounded by canvases. The walls looked familiar. I brushed it off. I was exhausted, running on caffeine and muscle memory, barely noticing the details. The second sign came the next morning, when I stopped by my parents' apartment on my way to the office. I'd left some important tax documents in my old room, and figured I'd grab them quickly and head to work. The doorman greeted me, but paused, checking his screen, then frowned slightly. "You're here to see Miss Chloe, right?" I shook my head. "No, I'm here to see my parents." He hesitated, then waved me through, his expression uncertain. Upstairs, everything felt off. The smell of fresh paint hung in the air, mixed with the sharp tang of turpentine. The entryway was cluttered with boxes labeled Chloe Gallery Materials. Sunlight streamed from what used to be my bedroom now. It was bright, open, unrecognizable. There was a new door plate. "C. Parker Studio." I stared for a moment, trying to make sense of it. Inside, Chloe had set up an entire workspace. Easels, rolling carts, an expensive new Mac, rows of paint, a ring light, even a coffee machine with her name on it. She looked up, her headphones around her neck, and grinned. "Sam, didn't expect to see you. Can you close the door? The AC's messing with my drying time." It was a small thing, but it hit me all at once. My old life, my trophies, books, files gone. In their place, Chloe's world had expanded, swallowing up every inch I'd ever called my own. I managed a laugh, forced and brittle, and tried to keep it light. "Didn't realize you'd moved in." She shrugged. "Mom and Dad said it made sense. You're barely here. Plus, I need the space for my big solo show next month." I couldn't shake the feeling that I was intruding in my own family's home. I looked for my things, but found only 2 cardboard boxes stacked in the hallway, my name scribbled in black marker. Inside, I found my tax documents, a few old journals, and a note in my mother's handwriting. "Let us know where you want these sent. Hope the work trip went well. Love, Mom." The third breadcrumb was a voicemail from my dad. He sounded distracted, almost annoyed. "Hey, Sam, give us a call when you get a minute. There's something we need to discuss about the apartment paperwork. Nothing urgent." He didn't mention Chloe. He didn't mention the room. And for the first time, It struck me how quickly my presence had been erased. Still, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they just needed space. Maybe Chloe's show was a big deal, and I could stay at my own place for a while. But that night, as I sat in my apartment, a knot formed in my stomach. I started scrolling back through my texts and emails, looking for anything that hinted at a plan. That's when I noticed patterns I'd ignored before. Months of messages about temporary changes, hints about helping Chloe out, passing references to financial transfers and legal documents that I'd never seen. I decided to ask directly. I called my mom. She answered on the second ring, her voice unnaturally bright. "Sam, how was Miami? Are you exhausted? Chloe's been working so hard, her show is going to be huge. Anyway, what's up?" I didn't waste time. I went by the apartment today. My room's gone. There was a pause. "Oh, right? Yes. We meant to talk to you about that. It's just, Chloe's really struggling right now. She needs the space. We figured you'd understand. You're always so independent." A part of me wanted to explode, to demand an explanation, to make them feel how casually they'd erased me. Instead, I took a breath. "Okay, what about the apartment paperwork Dad mentioned?" Another pause. Longer this time. "We needed to help Chloe with her gallery lease, so we used the apartment as collateral. It's temporary. You weren't living there. And your name's not on the deed. So it was simpler this way." Simpler. The word stung. Simpler for them. Not for me. Still, I needed to know more. I called Dad, and his voice was flat, as if this was all business. "Chloe needed a leg up. It's just a piece of paper. Sam, you've got your own place. Don't be dramatic." When I pressed, he became defensive. "We're a family. We do what it takes to help each other. You're successful now. It's not like you need it." The more I asked, the more it felt like I was the outsider. They talked around me, avoided specifics, changed the subject. Even Chloe played along, posting Instagram stories of her new studio with captions about finally finding space to grow. There was no mention of me, no acknowledgement of what had been taken. And then came the final clue, a forwarded email from the building's management company, addressed to me by accident. "Dear Ms. Parker, as requested, all mail for Unit 15. B will be redirected to Ms. Chloe Parker, effective immediately." My name had been replaced. My space, my connection, my history wiped out. It hit me then. This wasn't an accident. It was a choice. A quiet, calculated removal. My family had closed ranks around Chloe, and I'd been edited out. For the first time, I realized just how deep the betrayal ran. It wasn't just about a room, or a missed phone call, or a handful of boxes. It was about being written out of my own story by the very people who were supposed to protect it. But as the shock set in, something else sparked beneath it, a slow, gathering clarity. If they thought I would just fade away, they didn't know me at all. The truth always arrives in layers. At first, it's a sting, like the slap of cold air when you walk out of a building at midnight, still half expecting the world to feel the same. But that shock, if you let yourself really sit with it, always gives way to a heavier kind of knowing. And for me, it started the moment I saw my own name replaced. My old life boxed up and handed off like an afterthought. On the surface, the betrayal seemed almost mundane. My family needed space. Chloe needed support. I wasn't living there, so why not use the apartment? That's what they said. But beneath that polite, practiced justification was something much darker. This wasn't just about real estate. It was about rewriting the rules of who belonged and who didn't. Sitting alone in my apartment that night, I scrolled through old messages and bank statements, piecing together the timeline. The first shock was how coordinated it all was. Months of discussions, quiet paperwork, legal consultations that I'd never been told about. My parents had met with the building's attorney weeks earlier, arranging for the transfer of all mail, utilities, even Chloe's new business filings under that address. Every temporary arrangement had been finalized, signed, and filed. Not a single conversation included me, but it went deeper. Looking back, I could see how this wasn't a sudden decision. It had been building for years. My role in the family had always been provisional, valuable when needed, invisible the rest of the time. Chloe's needs weren't just prioritized, they were protected, even if it meant erasing my own. The more I uncovered, the more blatant it became. I found texts from my mother to Chloe, sent weeks before my trip. Once Sam is out, we'll have the space set up. Dad's handling the paperwork. Another, buried in a long email chain. Don't worry about your sister. She's always fine on her own. The language was casual, almost affectionate. But what they were really saying was, she doesn't count. It was as if I'd finally been handed the script my family had always been using, but had never let me read. Every interaction suddenly made sense. The last-minute requests for money, the vague promises that things would be different next time, the way Chloe's emergencies always became my responsibility. They weren't random moments. They were chapters in a story where I was always the afterthought, always expendable. The realization landed hard, settling deep in my chest. For years, I'd been telling myself that if I just gave a little more, tried a little harder, eventually I'd earn a seat at the table. But now, seeing the evidence spelled out so clearly, I understood. I'd never been in the running. I was only ever the fallback. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, late into the night, every light on in the apartment. Outside, the city was humming with its own noise. But inside, it was just me and the quiet roar of betrayal. My hands shook as I printed out documents, highlighted timelines, cross-referenced emails and bank transfers. It felt clinical at first, like I was auditing someone else's disaster. But each piece of proof was personal. Every signature, every transaction, every email that left me off the CC list chipped away at whatever hope I'd been clinging to. That's when the second layer of the betrayal hit me. This wasn't just Chloe. My parents, both of them, had orchestrated everything. They'd closed ranks, made decisions in my absence, used my stability as the excuse to take whatever they wanted. They told themselves it was for the family. But families don't erase each other. They don't strip away history and call it simpler. And then, the deepest cut, realizing just how long it had been planned. This wasn't impulsive. I found calendar invites. Not just weeks old, but months. Blocked off for meetings with lawyers and brokers. My mother had written checks for Chloe's new business account before I even booked my flight to Miami. They'd been waiting for the right moment, the moment I was just far enough away, just busy enough, that I wouldn't notice until it was too late. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming faster as I replayed every moment, every overlooked detail. I remembered my mother's voice, light and dismissive. "You're always fine on your own." I remembered Chloe's casual shrug, the doorman's confusion, the way my name had simply vanished from every piece of paper that mattered. That night, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was wide awake, more clear-headed than I'd felt in years. I knew then that if I didn't draw a line, I would disappear completely. They'd already shown me how easy it was for them. So I made a decision. I wouldn't confront them in anger. I wouldn't beg for my place. Instead, I would gather every piece of evidence, every thread of the story they tried to erase, and I would show them exactly who they'd underestimated. It was no longer about a room, or even an apartment. It was about the story of my life, and finally, I was going to write my own ending. After years of bending until I nearly broke, clarity was a relief. There was no more begging, no more hoping for a change of heart. For the first time, I stopped trying to win their approval and started treating my own life like something worth protecting. If they wanted to handle this like business, I'd show them just how good I was at business. The first step was information. I gathered everything: bank statements, emails, text threads, even screenshots of Venmo transfers and calendar invites they'd left in the family group chat. Never dreaming I'd notice, I opened a private folder on my laptop and labeled it simply Receipts. The more I compiled, the more a story emerged, not just of this one betrayal, but a long, detailed pattern of exploitation, always wrapped in family language, always justified as helping Chloe. I could see how many times I'd bailed them out, how many deposits I'd made, how many promises had been quietly broken. I reached out to a friend from college, Emily, who'd become an attorney specializing in family and real estate law. I told her everything, sparing no details. She listened, her face darkening as the story unfolded. Sam, you need to protect yourself now. Don't tip your hand. Start a paper trail and lock down anything with your name on it. If they used your assets as collateral without your knowledge, that's serious. Following her advice, I froze all joint accounts and moved my savings into a separate bank. I changed passwords, called the building management, and requested written confirmation of any paperwork filed on my behalf. When I received the legal documents transferring mail and access to Chloe, I forwarded them straight to Emily, who flagged a handful of inconsistencies and possible violations. Next, I confronted the building's attorney. I kept my tone measured. All business. I need a full record of who authorized these changes, and on what legal basis. I want copies of every document with my name. His discomfort was obvious. He'd assumed this was a family matter, not realizing there could be consequences for bypassing one owner's consent. By the end of the call, he'd promised to review everything, suddenly very careful with his words. I didn't stop there. I started documenting every communication with my parents and Chloe. No more calls. Only emails or texts, each one archived and time-stamped. If they wanted to treat me like an outsider, I'd respond with the same cold professionalism I used in boardrooms. A week later, my parents showed up at my office unannounced. They came as a unit, all forced smiles and brittle concern, trying to talk in circles about family priorities. I let them speak, then calmly outlined what I knew: dates, signatures, transfers, and the fact that using my financial history as leverage without my consent was not just unethical, but potentially illegal. My father bristled. Defensive. Sam, don't make this ugly. We're family. Chloe needed help, and you weren't using the place. I cut him off. Steady as steel. That apartment was as much mine as yours. You had no right to make decisions behind my back. And you know it. My mother tried guilt, tears in her voice, saying, "We just thought you'd understand. You always do." I didn't flinch. Not this time. I'm done being your backup plan. That was the last time I raised my voice. After that, everything moved fast and silent. My attorney sent official requests to reverse the property transfer, citing improper documentation and breach of fiduciary duty. She also initiated an inquiry into the building's legal process, putting everyone involved on notice. I filed credit monitoring alerts and notified every bank of possible identity fraud. I even reached out to the gallery where Chloe was holding her show, requesting that any sales from her studio in my name be put on hold pending investigation. The sense of calm was almost unfamiliar. I wasn't reacting, I was controlling the narrative for the first time. When my parents tried to call, I let it go to voicemail. When Chloe sent frantic texts accusing, pleading, then raging, I archived every single one. I knew how quickly this could spiral, and I wanted every move documented. But even as I pressed forward, I was never alone. Emily checked in daily, making sure I didn't miss a step. My old college roommate, Brian, offered a couch and a listening ear. Even my building's doorman, the same one who'd called me Ms. Chloe, apologized after realizing what had happened. Little by little, I rebuilt a circle of people who saw me, not just what I could do for them. The most satisfying moment came when my attorney delivered a cease and desist to my parents and the building, formally demanding that all activity using my identity or property stop immediately. For the first time, they were on the defensive. I could feel the shift suddenly. They were the ones scrambling to respond, their justifications unraveling. Retaliation, for me, was never about revenge for its own sake. It was about drawing a boundary, enforcing it, and refusing to be erased. Every document, every legal move, was a declaration. I am not disposable. And while they scrambled for explanations, I felt a sense of peace settle in. I hadn't lost my family. I'd finally seen them for who they were. And that clarity was the most powerful weapon I'd ever held. Once the wheels of real accountability started turning, there was no way for my family to control the outcome. They were used to operating in whispers, behind closed doors, trusting that no matter how far they went, I'd always absorb the fallout. But for the first time, I wasn't the one left holding the pieces. I was the one drawing the line. And this time, it was legal, public, and final. The official paperwork from my attorney hit them like a cold wave. It wasn't just a letter, it was a complete, documented list of every unauthorized transaction, every property transfer, every instance where my identity had been used without my consent. It demanded a full reversal of the apartment's paperwork and held them personally liable for any damages if they didn't comply. The building's legal counsel, suddenly alert to their own exposure, backed me up immediately. Within a week, the management company had frozen all actions involving my former room and any mail. Pending a formal review, for the first time, my parents and Chloe realized I wasn't bluffing. My mother called, her voice trembling with anger and fear, insisting I was tearing the family apart. Chloe messaged me in all caps, threatening to go public about my so-called selfishness. But I'd already moved beyond emotion. Everything was in writing. Every accusation, every attempt at guilt or manipulation. I forwarded to my attorney, building a trail so clean that even they had to see they'd gone too far. Then, almost predictably, the family group chat exploded. My parents, cornered, tried to rally relatives on their side, but the facts spoke for themselves. The evidence was undeniable: documents, statements, timelines that matched up far too neatly for this to be some misunderstanding. My aunt, usually my mother's biggest supporter, texted me privately. I had no idea. I'm so sorry, Sam. Word spread quickly, not just among relatives, but through our parents' professional circles, even into Chloe's art community. Chloe's gallery show, which was supposed to be her big break, started falling apart. The venue put sales on hold, citing the ongoing legal dispute. A few local art blogs picked up the story. Family battle over New York apartment threatens rising artist's career, and suddenly Chloe's friends weren't just avoiding me. They were questioning her. My parents faced awkward questions at the country club. Their once proud image as supportive, modern parents slipping away in whispers and stares. Throughout it all, I stayed steady. I didn't argue, didn't post on social media, didn't answer the phone. Every communication went through my lawyer. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to their chaos, I was directing the process. And as the days passed, I saw just how fragile their power had always been. Without my silence, without my willingness to take the blame, the whole house of cards fell quickly. When the review was completed, the management company restored my legal rights to the apartment, formally nullifying the unauthorized changes. They issued an apology in writing, acknowledging their failure to protect my interests. My parents, faced with the prospect of civil litigation and public embarrassment, caved. They sent an email cold, formal, careful with every word, agreeing to every term my attorney demanded. The apartment was fully restored in my name. All outstanding debts that had been pinned to my credit were cleared. Chloe, suddenly cut off from the one thing that had enabled her lifestyle, lost her studio and had to move out within a month. There was a moment when my mother reached out privately, asking if there was any way to put this behind us, for the sake of family. But I knew better now. I didn't need reconciliation built on denial or fresh promises to do better. I wanted closure, not a truce. My decision was final. No more favors. No more negotiations. I told my family, clearly and calmly, that I wished them well, but I was done playing the role they'd written for me. There would be no more last-minute bailouts. No more taking the fall for choices I never made. When it was over, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt peaceful. For the first time, my life was mine to shape. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the sound of boundaries finally respected. After everything unraveled, life felt oddly quiet. There were no more late-night calls demanding money or rescue. No last-minute family emergencies where I had to drop everything and play savior. For the first time in years, I could actually hear myself think. I didn't expect rebuilding to feel so gentle. With the legal mess behind me, I moved through my days with a lightness I barely recognized. I spent mornings in my own space, really mine, this time watching the city wake up over coffee, realizing how much energy I'd spent waiting for the next crisis to erupt. There was nothing left to anticipate except what I chose for myself. The strange thing is, when you finally set boundaries, the world doesn't collapse. It expands. As the dust settled, the circle around me changed. The friends who checked in during the worst days, Emily, Brian, even the doorman who made sure my mail stayed safe became my anchor. We celebrated the small wins. Emily and I went out for drinks the night the building confirmed the paperwork was corrected. Brian organized a rooftop dinner with a few friends just because he said I deserved to have people gather for me. Not just because of me. Even Grandma Beatrice, who always quietly believed in me, sent a card in her careful script. Proud of you for standing tall. Family is who stands with you, not who stands over you. I realized that chosen family wasn't just a saying. It was a promise I could finally accept. People who didn't want something from me, who weren't measuring my worth by what I could provide, but who saw me for myself. The more space I gave myself from my parents, and Chloe, the clearer everything became. The guilt that used to hang over me, was I doing enough? Was I being selfish? Could I have saved them from themselves? Began to fade. I saw now that loving someone doesn't mean letting them consume you. It doesn't mean writing yourself out of your own life for their comfort. With time, I leaned into building the kind of life I'd always postponed. I took a real vacation. Not one where I had to answer emails or send last-minute wires. I launched a new branch of our marketing agency, hiring people who'd supported me at my lowest. I decorated my apartment just the way I wanted. No borrowed furniture. No reminders of obligations I couldn't escape. Even Chloe, once the center of every conversation, drifted away from the spotlight. Last I heard, she'd started over in a smaller town, finally forced to find her own footing. My parents retreated too, embarrassed by the fallout. They sent a few cautious emails, but I never felt compelled to reply. There was nothing left to negotiate. The era of endless second chances was over. Sometimes, I look back at old photos, family vacations, birthdays, graduations, and I still feel a pang. Loss isn't tidy. It lingers in the quiet moments. But I don't regret choosing myself. Not for a second. The relief of no longer being responsible for everyone else is a kind of freedom I never knew existed. I share this not because I want sympathy, but because I know I'm not alone. So many of us have been the strong one, the fixer, the family glue that never cracks. We're told it's noble, but nobody warns you what it costs. If you've ever had to set a boundary that nobody understood, or walk away from a role you never chose, I want you to know, it's okay. You can choose yourself, and the world won't end. It might actually begin. So I'll leave you with this. Have you ever had to make the kind of choice that changed everything? One where you put yourself first, even when everyone else called it betrayal? I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. Let me know where you're watching from. And if this resonated, consider subscribing for more stories about finding your voice, your boundaries, and your chosen family. Because at the end of the day, we all deserve to belong to ourselves. Most of all,